Okay, we're ready to start the continued public hearing for 253 Meadowbrook Road. And there were several outstanding issues that were brought up at the last session of the hearing that we are going to take a look at. And Joe, what is your recollection of what those issues were?
So we have the legal request in for town council opinion on the status of the private way as a street according to the zoning bylaw. It was the issue as far as blasting. There was some questions that were raised as a result of the presentation as far as impacts to neighbors. That was an item to be rectified tonight. There was also a question about landscaping, some sort of guarantee on landscaping. There was discussion about parking on Meadowbrook, whether there was going to be any provisions or relying on the planning board's decision for preventing construction vehicles from being parked on the street. There was also some discussion as far as flexibility of the location of the house as it sat on the site, pivoting around the septic system. I think there were some questions of the board towards the end of the hearing asking about that. The board was provided with revised copies of the site plan. Architectural plans were received by the office. Board has a copy of the revised landscaping plan, as well as opinion from council, which was also distributed to the attorneys for both the applicant as well as the abutter. And there's also an email dated November 19th with some recommending some language on screening from attorney Jamie Medea.
Okay. When we had the last discussion, the way I recollect that we left it was that you were going to get in touch with the building inspector about the road issue. Did you do that?
Yeah, the building inspector wrote a letter to the planning board taking a position on the road that the road is not a street, as that word is defined in the zoning bylaw, and therefore doesn't subject it to that shared way to setbacks. And then someone from planning board requested an opinion from
I have it. I don't have
the planning board requested it.
I have it as I have the building inspector's memo on my computer. I don't have a hard copy.
Okay.
To summarize his position, which I have also shared with the board the same opinion of my own, that the zoning bylaw defines what a street is, and it refers to the official map. And this private way is not shown on that, so therefore it's not a street. His opinion was forwarded to town council to basically have a...
Well, let's not use a passive voice. A determination came from the building inspector.
Yes.
The building you forwarded that determination to town council.
Yes.
for town council's opinion, because for some reason the building inspector's determination came to me personally in the form of a letter. I never asked for the inspector's interpretation, but I immediately turned around. It didn't come from you. It came directly from the building inspector to me. I then, believe me, I don't want to be in the middle of the is it a road discussion. So, and I think I made that clear at the last hearing session. So why I'm in the middle, I don't know, but I am.
Well, I think last time you said that you weren't going to settle for just an opinion from the building inspector.
Let me finish.
Okay.
So, having gotten the letter from the inspector, I then followed my own advice, because our advice then was to work with town council and the inspector to work out an answer to the question, is it a street? And Joe sent a copy of the letter, the inspector's letter, off to council and asked council's opinion. And we got council's opinion today. And I'm not an attorney, But it sounds to me as though what council is saying was slightly different from what the building inspector said. The town council was saying that it's not a street because it's not on the official map of the town, which is not the same thing as the zoning map of the town.
She said it's not on any of them. It's not on the official map, the zoning map, or the GIS map. She says nowhere.
But yeah, it begs a couple of questions, but I don't think we need to get into those questions tonight. It does beg some questions, though. You know, one of them is, if this street isn't, what other streets aren't? If the official map is the determinant of what is and isn't a street, and the official map was produced in 1946, then what does that mean? But we don't need to get into
for another. Maybe I'll send you an email. She missed one thing that I think you know. She made it clear it's not a street, but she made the present situation sound really, I think, more confusing than it is. I'll send you an email because.
Don't send me an email.
I'll send Joe an email. I never send you an email, as you know. I'll send it to Joe, and I figure he'll decide who forwards it to you. All right.
Okay.
But it's.
I'm sure, you know, you're an attorney, so you're going to have an opinion on it.
Well, I'm not even. We don't even have to spend time because they weighed in, but we'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. So the town council has said this is not a street and therefore not subject to the setback provision. So that from town council's perspective, that handles that issue. Mm-hmm. Next issue was the blasting issue. And my recollection of the blasting issue was that there was considerable concern expressed that the blasting protocols don't adequately protect people from recovery if there's damage. And so I think the way that we left that was that you were going to try and work with the neighbors, you meaning the team, to try to arrive at some kind of understanding of how the blasting activity is going to take place, what the notifications are, and what indemnity there's going to be for making people whole if there's damage related to the blasting. Is that an accurate? Is that what people remember?
Mm-hmm. It was left somewhat up in the air last time, yes. And what I can report to the board is that on Friday we have Ken Smith here from Main Drilling and Blasting. On Friday, he spent between 2 and 3 hours meeting with Mr. Garrity, as well as Mr. Becker and Mr. and Mrs. Becker to go over blasting. So we've discussed it at some length. Mr. Smith can get into it in some depth for the board if you'd like, but I know you've certainly had blasting before. But for me as an attorney, and then I can say what's available, and then if you want anything further, Mr. Smith can help with this. But a homeowner has 3 possible remedies if he thinks he's been damaged or she's been damaged by blasting, 2 of which I can speak to very easily. The third, Mr. Smith can spend more time with. One is you can report it to your property insurer, and they will subrogate and go after, as a casualty loss, and they will go after the blaster. Number 2, you have a cause of action against the blaster and the homeowner who hired the blaster if you can prove that there's damages. But the far more preferred route is whatever happens, there'll be a pre-blast survey. You can submit a claim, and Mr. Smith can explain how that claim works if you think that you've been damaged by blasting.
We sort of went through all that
Yeah.
at the last meeting. I mean,
We didn't talk about the other two remedies last time. We only talked about the claim, through the provisions under state statute. But they have the other two. The other thing I can add is blasting. Blasting under the law is strict liability. You do, if you have damages as a result of the blasting, the homeowner doesn't have to prove that the blaster was negligent. Just has to prove that they were damaged as a result of the blasting. And it's kind of funny. The most common similar situation is dogs. Dogs are strict liability also. If your dog bites someone off your property, you don't have to prove negligence. The dog bit you, you're responsible. Dynamite's the same way.
yeah.
So those are the avenues. If you want more detail on, that's about all I can tell you on the first two. You submit under your homeowner's policy, or you sue directly, which would be kind of foolish. You might as well have your own policy subrogate and go after the blast. But the third one, if you want more information, Mr. Smith is here. He can hit on the procedure that's available under state statute. I'm not certain if the board is looking for additional information beyond that, but we did meet for probably closer to 3 hours last week with both of the neighbors. Yep.
Yes, there's a comment right behind you. Go ahead.
I'm Dan Quinn, and I live at 243 Meadowbrook Road, and which is to the east of the property that we're talking about tonight. And depending on where the blasting occurs, part of my property would fall within, or my home would fall within the 250 feet, and part of it would be beyond that. And I'm just curious as to how that works then.
We'll cover it.
Well, last time we talked about expanding the radius to, I think it was
250 to 400, but I went down and saw Captain Robertson. The issue with that is that it then becomes a planning board mandate to monitor now, which is very nebulous. The state law is 250 feet. That's what they're responsible for. He was pretty adamant about that. I tried to get Captain Robertson to come tonight. It was a bit late notice, unfortunately, for him. So, but if Mr. Quinn's close, it's better for us that we do it and not have an issue afterwards.
What you do is you
blasting
videotape ahead of time.
The blasting company with the homeowner does extensive videoing data and then comes back.
So you can go as far as you want in terms of video, as long as people let you in.
Yep.
So can I have insurance then? That you
Yeah,
would? Okay.
yes, that's fine. You're next to the bankers on the other side there.
No, I'm next to the Garrity.
I beg your pardon, the Garrity.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
yeah.
I was saying the Garys, I would probably videotape it myself too, if you're concerned, in addition to the pre-blast survey, just to have a second set of eyes.
Okay. The next issue was landscaping and some concern about, I think I'll try to recapitulate my understanding. I think the concern was the ability of the proposed replacement plantings to take root and thrive on what is essentially a rocky terrain, and with some suggestions for perhaps creating more of a pocket, if you will, for those plants to stand a better chance of succeeding. That was my recollection of that discussion, and I think if I remember correctly, the landscape architect was going to take a look at that suggestion and get back to us with a response.
Yeah, since we met, the Wetteraus and Garrity's met, it was last week? Yeah, and last week, also, Mr. Davis and Mrs. Garrity and two folks from Greg Lombardi Design, including Greg, met at the site, and I think they worked out a procedure pretty well. Greg can tell you where things are at of that, but I can also tell you, and I think we've got the language down that Jamie Medija, who represents the Garrities, and I have worked out some language that is satisfactory to both parties if it's inserted in the decision as far as, arriving at, we've shown you approximately where the plantings will be. Everyone recognizes that the field conditions are going to dictate exactly where the trees go, and Mr. Davis will be present when that happens, and it's going to be at locations not only agreed to by the planning board, because I know Kim has to go out and approve the final location, but it'll be at locations approved by Mr. Davis and Greg Lombardi Design, and we've also talked about the possibility of a fifth tree that looks like it's indicated and it looks like it will survive, because there is already an overstory there, and there's some it's a weighing process as to how far under that overstory you go and still have something survive. So I guess that's the newest. In fact, Greg can take it from here. I think that's the newest planting plan showing those 4 trees that were added since the proposal 2 hearings ago.
So just, it might be helpful. Hi. When we met with Mr. Davis, he described one of his concerns was the edge of the driveway and wanting at least 15 feet for the canopy of the trees and survival to push them back in so they didn't encroach on the driveway. These are the diagrams with the possibility of the 5th tree. The existing trees are in red. We actually agreed on removing 2 more trees here that didn't provide any screening value up to the Garrity's house at the back of the garage. Garrity's view line is right through here. So what we decided, we took his diagram, basically translated that to this working diagram, which we actually got him the 15 feet. We tried to, you can see there's some encroachment on, his diagram was quick and it was a hand-drawn thing, so we were trying to do is interpret. So allowing for staggering, we isolated a ledge and a ledge. We think there might be a valley of soil in there. So in this, what we agreed upon was in this sensitive area that we would actually open up when we start to excavate and not ruin the roots of the other larger existing trees that are still here. That we could then find where to place the first tree, which is this is the large hemlock that's a transplant that's 32 feet tall, so it's a big tree. And it's going to have a big root ball, so that almost has to take priority. And then the other trees would be arranged around it, so there's a certain diagrammatic quality to this. But the idea is that we would be placing it in the field with Mr. Davis and us there, looking at the views and getting to an agreement on that. So.
There was a secondary landscaping issue too. I think that they were looking for some comfort in some reassurance that should the plantings not survive or not thrive, that replacements would be forthcoming. And I think the answer to that one is that that's a condition in the planning board's decision. So
We're expecting to see that in your decision.
it's always in our decision. Those are the only landscaping issues that I remember. I had a question about drainage if the asphalt. Let's see, I'm looking for Rob Jim.
Yeah.
If the asphalt, if the pervious material was replaced with asphalt, does it still work? And there's a table here. You submitted a table that shows that it still works.
It still works, albeit with not as great a reduction in volume and rate,
But there's still a reduction.
Still a reduction.
Yeah, I took a look at the table. So I'm satisfied it still does work. Let's see, the next thing was the...
Last thing, Al, we will get Joe the proposed language. Jamie and I'll make certain now that we can type it up that it's exact, and we'll get it to him tomorrow on the planting.
Okay.
That is a proposed condition that we
Yes.
agree we seek to have in the...
Okay.
So on the impervious, are we okay to go with the regular asphalt? You would prefer that for long-term
It doesn't matter
maintenance?
to me. I just wanted to be
Okay.
sure that it would
No,
work
we
either
would
way.
prefer it.
We're not going to condition it either way.
All right.
Then there was the issue of rotating the house, or moving the footprint a little. That was what you mentioned, was the last, sort of the thing that was mentioned last. And I don't know if Marcus, were you able to take a look at that?
Yes, I was. And let me, yeah, the your site plan. Just to do this in overview, both in response to the comments, but also concern about the overall scope of the project. We looked at there's a septic system right here that the family room, or the informal space of the house, is sort of sitting on a grade beam that spans over that, and that sort of locks this part of the house in place. And it can't move this way, or the garage violates the side yard setback, and it can't go that way, or we're into septic issues. And the house was sort of stuck this way, so rotating it was really not possible. So we looked at another solution. And what we sought to do was to compress the footprint of the house. And I wrote a letter to the planning board that sort of described it. But in essence, what we did was we took these two parts of the house and we squeezed it. So we took about 15 or 16 feet of overall length out of the house. That resulted in a couple things. It moved the house back from Meadowbrook Road by about 10 feet. It moved this part of the house away from the setback line by about 5 feet. Let me just show you diagrammatically what the elevation is. So in elevation, the red areas indicate this is the face of the existing house with a pop out on the second floor and going back, and this is how far we pushed it back on the Meadowbrook side. Also, behind this archway, which in the new design is only colonnade is only 2 feet deep, simply just like almost like a moon gate. We pushed the line from the house from here all the way back to that edge. That gave us a lot more flexibility with things. It enabled us to rotate the garage facing the Garrity's to a point that the closest part of the garage is 8 feet further away from the Garrity's. It didn't affect the RGFA because the RGFA only got 3 feet smaller. But by getting rid of the colonnade and a large double height space inside the house that doesn't count as RGFA, we were able to reduce the cubic volume of the house. Probably I didn't do the calculation, but probably between 5 and 10%. But you can see from the house didn't get any fatter to compensate, but the house got shorter, and it was basically by squeezing things out of the other plan. The other thing we did in response to the Garrity's concerns about the massing of the garage in relationship to the property is that we took there were two gables on the garage that we hipped. So instead of there being a gable here with painted siding, we have a hipped slate roof. And it's you can see in this view right here, there's a hip right there and a hip right there. The trees we rendered very transparent. I mean, I can bring this closer. But instead of having a lot of cream-colored trim here, siding here, and cream-colored siding there, which you'd read through the trees, you're looking at slate. So we've reduced the amount of vertical, painted, finished wood that you see, and slate behind a screen of evergreens is pretty effectively wiped out. I mean, it's not. So we visually lowered the presence of the house by about 10 feet on that side. So what we really want to do is absolute best efforts to make the house as tight as possible. And as a result, one of the things is we're able to angle the garage even further away from the house. So when you back out of the closest garage bay, you're not in danger if you lapse in concentration taking out one of the columns in the portico. So in terms of, this is a shows the difference here on the second, this is the footprint change. It's basically the elimination of the colonnade. And that was a 10-foot reduction here, and almost 11-foot reduction on the pop out of the bay on the second floor. This came back 5 feet, and the garage rotated counterclockwise several degrees. So this was the closest point of the house to the Garrity's, and it's now moved back. So that was our attempt to address the issue of footprint, size, and orientation on the house.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say is we looked at if we could move the house down. So rather than being as we move the house down, the amount of excavation that we have to do sort of remains the same. So we're simply moving the project in a line down because given the gentle slope of the property, it's not the kind of property that allows for a walkout. I mean, it would become a 3-story house if we did that. So.
Good. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think if there was anything else that we had that we were looking for information on. Did you have anything else, Jonathan?
That's what I intended to cover tonight.
Okay. In that case, any other questions or comments from the board at all? We okay?
Does the reduction change the blasting schedule at all?
I thought for me to say it's the house. Actually, I think it would. My expert opinion, simply because we're not blasting that, and that's pretty close to ledge, and this is very ledgy as well. So it's making. I think it may make a modest difference. The nice thing about this is that it's a pretty fragile, rocky environment on the Meadowbrook side, and it simply I think getting the house 10 feet away on that cliff is going to make a significant difference in terms of the impact on the streetscape along Meadowbrook.
Yeah. I actually remembered one more thing, and that was concerned that if the runoff strategy doesn't work and Meadowbrook Road gets impacted by greater runoff, is there a way to, first of all, determine what the baseline condition is, and then second of all, to then monitor the runoff activity? I remember we did talk about that at the meeting. I don't remember where that left off.
Rob should address that now.
Yeah, do you remember that, Rob? We did talk about that.
I don't recall talking about that at the public hearing. We had some discussion maybe at the site walk. And I think, I know that certainly that Dave chimed in as well. I think in terms of establishing baseline conditions, it's a pretty difficult thing to do on this because we're talking about exclusively overland flow. There's no channelization on the site that really gives you a point of definition where you can take measurements.
You couldn't do it. You're saying you couldn't do a monitor well, for example, because there's nothing to.
No point.
It's all sitting on top of the rock.
Yeah, and it just flows overland. In this particular case, it flows overland in 180 degrees direction. So there's no point of concentration that you could really measure. So I don't think this is a very good test candidate for.
Unless you immediately after a rainstorm measure the depth in the infiltration system or something.
Well, you can certainly monitor the infiltration system and see if that's performing. If it's not overtopping, it's working. If the infiltration system is surcharged on a regular basis, then there's an issue with it.
How would you do that? Would you
Well,
just put a monitor well in?
There's inspection.
There's inspection boards. We've done it on a couple of others where they have a year. We give them a year basically after it's all built. Days up there. You get a year after it's all built, and you're trying to find a storm that's like an inch thunderstorm, and then as soon as that's over, the engineer goes out to see, measures
Where the water level
where the water level is, and they compare it to the theoretical.
Oh, that's a good.
So
We could do that.
Yeah,
we've done that on a couple.
The only thing I would say, and would be happy to do that, when you take real world versus design storms, a design storm is say, 4.6 inches of rain in 24 hours at a certain distribution curve. And then when you get a real storm event, it doesn't match that distribution curve, and it might be 4 inches of rain in 6 hours or in 29 hours or something. So it's not exactly an apples and apples comparison.
Yeah,
when
but you
compare
could
them.
put that storm into your baseline condition.
Yeah, you could, well, if you have the precipitation measured at hourly intervals, then
Right.
you could run a model on that.
Yeah, generally what we found is that we're supposed to be able to measure the water levels. It never gets above the storm.
Yeah.
We put like witness paper in like outlets and stuff like that too. So you can, if overflows aren't supposed to be going off on like to a train fall comes.
I think we should do it anyway because it basically it codifies what's actually happening, so you don't get anecdotal sort of reports of things. You can see exactly what the situation is, or at least try to.
And I think typically, I don't know if we have it in this one, Joey, but typically in our operation and maintenance plan, we have a requirement for an engineer to go out there, during an actual rainfall event and take measurements and observe the infiltration system and see where the water level is.
Yeah, see how it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Those are all the things I remember. Is there anything else? Yes.
I think I mentioned it informally before, and we've had that discussion separately with the team. There are, on the drawing, there are 5 compressors shown on the back side of the garage. There's a plan down there with the trees on it. And the discussion that just took place is that we were looking, because these are compressors that go off in the summer and they're going to cycle. We talked about the decibel quality and all that, but they do cycle. We've asked that they could be relocated. There was an agreement that it would be studied if it could be relocated, and if not, there would be a need to have an acoustical engineer involved, and that they would produce a design in order to abate the noise that comes out of these cycling compressors. The plans don't show it. They're just, it's because it's a schematic. But our concern is that the sound, because it's the back of the house, it's really our front of our house. And that the noise would go to the Garrity's as well as to us. Yes, uphill, but line of sight. So that's on the table. I don't know how you would deal with that in terms of seeing that would be accomplished. But it is a concern. Because
First time we're hearing that concern, actually.
Informally, when we left the meeting last time.
Okay.
I said, is it too late to bring it up? And you said, no, bring it up the next time.
Okay.
So, and there you go.
There you are.
Thank you.
So, that's something that, it's important because it could be a noise generator if it isn't handled.
So what we talked about was that we're proposed this is a schematic for the HVAC design. The system is being designed by Sean Fennessy, who is the expert on designing residential HVAC systems, and working with him in conjunction with the Suntech, who's a great acoustical consultant. We're going to figure out what the issues are here, discuss that with the vectors. The other options are well, the question was asked whether some of these could be located to the Meadowbrook Road side, and we would, given the line of sight issues and use of evergreen screening, those most likely could be hidden quite well on the Meadowbrook side if we needed to do that.
I'm just trying to think how we condition that.
So that, And there are other concerns. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to take this guy right here and move him around the corner.
Maybe what we do is put a condition in that they come back when they have the HVAC design further along and just resolve the issue of where the condensers are going to go.
Yeah.
There's a good chance that we'll simply be able to solve it with engineering in terms of the units that we specify and the acoustical treatment, both on this side and on the retaining wall, on the other side, and any other sound mitigating hardscape components we can put there. If that doesn't work, we can go to Plan B and take 1 or 2 of the units or 3 of the units and put them here. We can find another place for them.
Let's bring up another noise generator. The generator.
Yeah.
Generators over here. The generator cycles vary and frequently, and typically during once a month. Typically,
we have a standard that it has to be 40 dBA at the property line.
So we'll work with a setback on that.
Yeah.
I mean, my recommendation would be that you treat the ACs as performance standard, just like the generator, and say at the property line you hit 40 and provide the details on how you're meeting that performance standard, and/or modify the decision to relocate the ACs.
Yeah, we could do it that way too. Yeah.
One of the concerns is that I know that there's an ambient noise level in Weston. This is one of the quietest areas in the entire Roads Trust area. You can't hear 20, you can't hear 30, you can't hear 128. Okay? We're talking about a summertime situation. If we go according to that stipulation, which isn't necessarily, it has to be done that way. We're just asking that, if it can be relocated to the other side of the building, the problem goes away.
Well, maybe we do both. We stipulate the 40 dBA at the property line and review of the detailed HVAC design when it's ready.
So if necessary, we could relocate, assuming they're adequately screened with plantings, we could relocate them to the Meadowbrook site.
Yeah. All right. Any
So
other?
would that be that for the board, or can that be done administratively?
I think it's coming back to the
I
board.
think it comes back, but it's not a hang-up. Any other questions? Great. In that case, motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's actually slippery. It's alarming.
You won't be able to hear a thing.
I'm already there. They're very small.
But I mean,
Using a better light.
no mention. Just a quick sucker.
Teams being relegated to the second division. Don't expect a report.
The old one. Eyes in the back of my head.
You better. Oh, yeah. I hope we can pull together a team. We've got a bunch of, we're going to 65.
Well, that's, they're talking about reducing it to whatever they need, which is, but that wasn't even brought up. Well, that's at the point. As they get older.
Motioning for, oh, no, I'm motioning for someone else.
Doors closed?
Okay.
Want your doors closed?
Not yet.
No?
Well, only because then we can just close from executive session and then enter.
Oh, okay, so you want to do the other business first?
Exactly.
Okay.
We want Joe's.
Yeah, he's coming. It's just there's a bunch of people he has to get past. While he comes, in dealing with town council and a lot of 2016 stuff, I wasn't able to finish the planning board reports.
Oh, no. Tell me it ain't so.
If I finish them tomorrow, do you think on articles we might be able to, if we're meeting on Friday, just review the draft planning board report? Otherwise, we're scheduling another meeting to finalize that document for our annual special town meeting.
What's the planning board?
Basically saying we held a hearing, here are the comments, here's our recommendation.
Yeah, we can do that Friday.
It may be a planning board.
For the moderator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on the hot seat, you know, under the lights, it's rough.
I don't know.
At least there is.
What's on the
What
agenda?
is this?
What?
What's next on the agenda?
Just a review amendment of 50 Loring, and then lighting changes for 183 Newton, and lighting and sign for 870.
We're gonna get it.
We're still doing that.
We're still gonna do it.
Yeah, we're just doing that last.
Yeah.
Yeah, that way we can just
It'll go well because Vanessa will be so punchy.
Yeah, let's giggle.
Yeah.